All right, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. My name is Stephen Krutzfeldt. I'm a business process consultant here with CDI, and I'm going to be your host for today's consulting webinar, which is going to be around automated reports. So this is something that I implemented for a client a couple months ago, and I thought it was kind of a cool concept and thought about some of the possibilities of how it can be rolled out on a larger scale. So I want to share it with all of our attendees today and get something recorded and up on our YouTube channel. So thanks all for joining it. If this is your first build along, what is a build along? Well, in short, it's an interactive experience designed to guide the viewer through the creation and deployment of a common business process. In today's case, automated email reports. If at any point you need help, feel free to post questions into our chat box in the little floating GoToMeeting window. There will be time designated at the end of the webinar for me to go through and answer as many of the questions as I can. To get the most out of today's webinar, please take good notes. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big fan of taking screenshots, actually. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Chances are if you have a question, somebody else probably has the same one, so feel free to post those. Please complete the survey afterwards also. That'll let me know how I'm doing, what I can do to be more effective in my the way I'm describing things. Also, if there are any other ideas that you guys have or what you'd like to see in these webinars, we always are looking for more information there as well. And know that this will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. And then also, if you would like an individual session with one of our consultants here at CDI, certainly let us know. I'll drop that link at the end as well. So feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help. So today's process is around automated email reports. And I was actually struggling a little bit with what to call this webinar and how to really explain it, because it's kind of broad, but I think that this kind of sums it up. But the intended audience for this webinar is going to be Laserfiche administrators, advanced Laserfiche users. This will be a more advanced concept that we're working with today. And any department heads that are interested in simplifying their reporting. We'll need access to the workflow design tool, first and foremost. That's where we'll be spending most of our time. The Laserfiche client, and then also probably briefly the admin console also. I'll just pop in there and show you what you'll need to have set up in order to roll this out at your organization. And I put up an example of the finished product here. So what we're really going to be going through today is how can we query data in Laserfiche and then have that be formatted or formulated into a table and then sent to us via an email. So some of the examples I've rolled out have been like contracts that are going to expire soon. If we want a list that goes out at the end of the month to say, hey, these are actionable items that are being managed in your Laserfiche environment that you need to go through and do something with. So in this case, the example I grabbed in the example I'll be building today is, give me a list of all of my full-time employees. Just give me a roster of everyone who's an active employee today based on the information that's being tracked in their Laserfiche folder. And so that's how this came out. So if the concept was a little ambiguous, I understand that, but what we're going to try and do is create a table based on queried data in Laserfiche and have that generate an automated email report. To help you follow along, we're first going to lay out the process. We're then going to build the workflow itself, which will take up most of the meeting today. And then we'll test it end to end and see how that finished product looks. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into it. So as I mentioned before, the goal of today's webinar is going to be to create a report that's sent out monthly via an email that's pulling data from your Laserfiche environment. Now, the first thing you will need to do is have some sort of template set up. If you want more details on setting up templates, some of the existing webinars that we have recorded on the CDI YouTube channel will take you through detailed steps of how to create a template and add fields. The main one we're going to be looking at today, I believe, is going to be the Office folder. And so in here, you can see different metadata fields that we're going to be querying, and this is where we're going to get our information. So if I want to know all of my full-time employees, I'm going to need to make sure that that data, first of all, exists somewhere in Laserfiche, such as a folder with their name, first name, last name, department, position, supervisor, and then, of course, employee status. So each one of those will need to be set up as such, and then we'll also need to make sure that they are then applied to our folders. So if we go into just Angela Martin here, I'm a big fan of The Office, so a lot of my test data is around that. So we've got a roster of the people from The Office. If we look at their metadata here, we can see that we have all of that applied to each one of these. So I have templates with first name, last name, department, supervisor, status, etc. So that will make it so it's something I can actually query and I can build a report off of. Something we're not going to be looking into today, but do know that there is a way to just export some of that metadata into an XML file or into an Excel spreadsheet or something like that also. The reports do exist, but that will be a concept for another day. So now that I know that I have my template set up and the template is added to this, we can start building our workflow. So I just created a blank workflow using the workflow design tool. And best practice is to always give it a unique name so you know what the workflow is going to do. By default, it will just be workflow 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. We want to say monthly employee reports. We'll make sure we have our connection set up. We can validate it. Looks good. Great. So when creating a reporting workflow, the first thing you're going to need to do is grab the data that you want to report on. And the way we'll do that is to search the repository. So I'm going to use the search repository activity, and it wants me to write a query in here. Now the easiest way to do this is to, I always cheat. I like to go into the Laserfiche client, go into the advanced search tool, and search what I want and include the syntax down here. So what I could do is, let's just start all this over so you can see exactly how I'm doing this. We're going to customize our search with the drop-down window here. And I'm going to definitely want field. Field is referring to the template fields. Name is going to be important because that's how we differentiate the type of document we're looking for, or whether it's a document, folder, etc. We also want to look within a specific area. If you want to search your whole repository, then you don't necessarily need this, but I want to limit it to one root folder. And most importantly, we want to include the search syntax because that's what we're going to copy over to our search. So if we close that, all this is configured because I was playing around with this earlier. But we have our employment status of full-time, because I'm only interested in looking at my full-time employees. I want to look at folders only. I want to look within the Dunder Mifflin root folder, and I'm not necessarily interested in including any subfolders. I only want to go to the next folder underneath, not any deeper. So if we search that, we'll see all of our full-time employees coming in here. There's 16 of them, and it wrote out our syntax for us. So we can just go ahead and Control-C, copy that, go over to our workflow, and under the search query window, we're just going to paste that right in. And if we test our search query, it'll show us that there are 16 entries that it found, so that's how we know it's working. Now, best practice is also to give each one of your activities a specific and unique name as well, very detailed, so that way when anyone else comes in behind you and wants to figure out what the workflow is doing or what each step is doing, it's much easier to follow if there are detailed descriptions of each activity. So I'm going to say get all active, or no, not even active, all full-time employees. All right, so once we have the data that we want to work with, the next thing we need to do is create a token. Now, create token and assign tokens are the same thing. In fact, I think the activity is called assign token values. But what we're going to do is create a unique token that we're going to use to build out the report later. It's not going to make sense right away, but essentially our report is going to be made up of some basic HTML pieces. And so we're going to need to create our header and our rows at this point, and then fill in what those headers and rows are going to include further down. So at this point, assign token values. We're just going to call this create header and rows. And the first token is going to be called header. So with our headers, we're going to use some basic HTML today. And if you've never seen HTML before or never used it, I can't think of a better way to introduce you to it, because this is some of the most basic building blocks, and can be used universally and can teach some of the basics. So this is kind of a segue into HTML as well. So with table headers, and actually with any HTML, you always have opening and closing elements. Sorry. And so with table headers, it's actually TH, and that's going to be the kind of greater than and less than angle brackets on each side. And then you'll have the same thing, but with a / right after the first angle bracket. And that is what is going to be the opening and closing, to say that everything contained in this is going to be our table header. And since we're going to have 4 columns, we're actually going to have 4 headers as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that. And 1, 2, 3, 4, just create 4 opening and closing for each one. Then within the THs, opening and closing, we want to have what is going to be the first name. This might be easier to see if we open up the token dialog. We're going to have first name, and then do a space, last name. So you can see I'm naming my columns here between the opening and closing brackets here. And then we'll do maybe position. I'm putting a space in here too, just so we can see a little bit better. And lastly is going to be the status, like the employment status. So if you want to make sure that's correct, make sure that there's angle bracket, TH, angle bracket, contained, and then the /. That should be the same for each. Just double checking my work. And it looks good. So that's what our headers are going to look like. So we hit OK. Next one we're going to create is our rows. And that one, we don't really know what the rows are going to look like yet, because we don't have enough information. So we're going to go ahead and just create a token called rows, and then say it's going to have multiple values. And at this point, that's all we need to do. And since we're creating a token, we can assign the token value via the modify option later on down. So as long as we make sure it's rows and it allows multiple values, we're okay to go. So now that we've gathered our data and we set up the tokens we're going to be using later, we now need to say that for every single folder that we find, i.e. for each entry, entries select output entries here. So we're going to say for each employee to give it that unique name. For each one of them, we want to retrieve the information from it. So this is going to be the activity that actually looks at the metadata. This finds all the folders, and then this one, this for each employee, will say for each folder, look inside each one, get that metadata, get those metadata fields that we're going to be actually pulling the report data from. So I'm going to call this retrieve employee data. And we'll go in and configure our fields by just clicking in here. This opens this up. We want to look at our office folder, and I want to pull off the first name, last name, position, and employee status, just like my columns were set up. So we found them all, and for each one, we're retrieving that data. So now what we need to do with that data is pass it along to our rows token. So this is where we're going to assign token values. So we're going to go ahead and drag that in and make sure that that's also contained in the for each, because we want to assign the value for each individual token. So we're just going to call this one assign values to rows. And this one's going to be similar to the headers, where we're going to use some basic HTML building blocks here. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I want to change this. Cancel. We don't want to create. We want to modify. Sorry about that. So the activity is going to be the create header and rows. because that's where our token is located at, because there's 2 inside of there. And the token is not headers, but rows. So the new value that we're going to have is going to be, first of all, here, let's open this up into token dialog so we can see that a little bit easier. So this is where we're going to actually assign our row value. Now the syntax for table rows is TR. Pretty easy to remember, right? Table header, TH, table row, TR. And just like the other one, we're gonna have the greater than, TR, less than, or angle brackets. And then we need to have the closing, which is angle bracket / TR and close. So that's going to have our table row, but within the table row, we're actually going to have the data as well, which is, I think, TD, table data. And once again, open and close, just like that. So each row is going to have multiple types of data within it, right? Because we want to have the first name, last name, position, and status all within every row. So we're actually going to have 4 table datas, but only 1 set of TRs because only 1 row. And this is not cooperating with me very well. You know what? That's okay. And do we need one more? So there's 1 there, and 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there. So we have 4 sets of table data that we're going to bring in. So now what we can do is for each one of those data sets, we're going to pull in the retrieve field values information that we brought in earlier. And we'll want to make sure that it's in the same order as what our columns were, so that way everything lines up. So we had table data, open and close, right there in the middle, we're going to add first name. And then within the second one, we're going to do last name. Third one, we want to do position. And the fourth one, we're going to have the status, employment status. And then we'll want to make sure that we are also appending this to existing values as well. So that way, if you have replacing existing values, then every single row that whatever the most up-to-date row is going to be, it's just going to override it. So then you only end up with 1 row. So we want to make sure that we're appending each one of these to our multi-value token so we get multiple rows coming in. So when you're done, if you look at your token dialog, you should see TR opening and TR closing on either end. And then for each type of data you want, make sure that's contained within the TD opening and closing elements. So once we have that, then the last thing we need to do is just formulate that all into a table. So we're actually going to do one more, assign token values. And this was going to be outside of the for each loop. So inside the for each loop, we want retrieve employee data and assign values to rows. And this one's going to be called create table. So in this, we'll just call it final table. We don't want to necessarily have multiple values, but the value is going to be, here, we'll open this up into token dialog again so we can see that on a little bigger canvas. The HTML for table is the word table, but then closing, same way, like that. So enclosed in the table is going to be our headers, space, rows. So within the table, it's going to grab our headers, which we have as just static. and then our rows, which are going to change. And since those are going to change, we're going to need to use something called the apply index. What apply index does is it basically takes each value and assigns it a number, almost like an ID. If you think about like a SQL table, how each row is going to have its own unique identifier, apply index is kind of doing the same thing. So we want to make sure that all the values are separated by a space. So apply index to the rows and make sure all values separated by a space. And so that'll allow us to index each row and then separate them. So we hit OK. This is what your final syntax should look like in the value. Table opening, table closing, headers by itself, and then rows should have those little square brackets enclosed on the pound signs. Okay. Now the last thing we need to do is this will go through and actually create the report for us. It'll create that table of the data we want that we grabbed up here. So now we need to make sure that we can email it out so we can actually deliver this information. And there's a Laserfish action called email. If this doesn't work for you guys right away, there may need to be some configuration done for your email server. We may need to get all that connected and set up. So if you do have issues, let our team know and we'd be more than happy to get that set up for you. We're going to call this one email reports. And I'm going to send this to just my personal email address. Call it monthly employee report. And it may seem like we want to attach it, but that's not actually the case. So what we're going to do instead, because it's not an actual attachment, we're not building any sort of tangible file or formatted file here. We're actually going to embed it into the email itself. So we want to go into the email editor. And in the email editor, we'll see that we have the option to select tokens. So if we select the tokens, we can grab our create table and our final table. One thing we do need to do though, and this is very, very important because I missed this step the first time I did it, we do need to format it. That it may bring it in, but it may not recognize necessarily what all the different elements of the table mean. So we need to say that it's HTML by just writing HTML. And so then it'll say, oh, this is HTML, and so it'll format it as such. So we hit OK, then we can publish. And so your final workflow should look something like this. Regardless of what it is you're looking to report on, you want to use the search to get everything you want the reporting done on. Create the table header and the empty rows token. And then for each record that you find with the search, retrieve the data you want to report on. We can then assign the value using TR and TD, create the table with opening and closing table, and then embed our headers and rows, and then ultimately email that. Now the last piece is, actually, sorry, we'll see if it prompts me again. We can go into our rule manager and we'll add a starting rule. So the starting rule is going to be, this is the wrong one. It's this one we just did. The starting rule is, first of all, going to be, we always give it the rule name, something specific to what is actually driving the rule. So in this case, we'll say schedule monthly. Make sure it's schedule instead of a condition. And from here, we can say start whenever, at what time. If you want to change that to AM, we could do that. So at 2:30 in the morning, repeating monthly on the 12th. So runs on day 12 of every month. You can configure that to not run on December, or if you want it to be every third Thursday or something like that instead of the actual date, you have some flexibility there as well. So we can say, all right, great, looks good, and then publish that, which I'm not going to because then I'll get really confused why I'm getting these random office characters in my email inbox every month. But once that's ready to go, I'm just gonna go ahead and hit play, and we can see what that finally looks like. So it looks like it went through all the steps just fine, and the email is sent. Let's see if I had anything come in over here on my personal email. And there you have it. So that's what it looks like. Now, if you have someone who's a little more familiar with advanced HTML, there's a way to build this out with lines. We can change the color, we can change the font. You can do a lot with the way that it actually looks. But from a very basic standpoint, if you're just looking to receive a monthly report of contracts expiring or invoices that haven't been paid or active employees or employees that need to be notified for open enrollment, which is fresh on everyone's mind right now, this is a way to do that that is pretty simple, pretty quick, and very effective and very helpful. So with that, if you have more questions or want to learn more about what you can do with Laserfiche, there are a wealth of resources out there, everything from Laserfiche. Google something that's Laserfiche related, chances are the first thing that's going to pop up is going to be something from Laserfiche Answers, because there's been thousands of active users on Answers. Someone's always on there, and there's always new questions. So chances are, if you have a question, somebody else has had it before you, and they've posted it to Answers. So definitely save that. Also, laserfiche.com Solution Exchange is another one where you can get a lot of good information. And then even at Cities Digital, we have a lot of documentation about different processes that we've built and that our customers are using. And then if you just have other questions too, there's a lot of resources there as well. And we're always adding more. Also, please take a chance to fill out the survey for a chance to win this awesome coffee mug, the CDI coffee mug. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for any questions that you might have. And if there are no questions, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to join me in this. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you get to use it. And if you need help deploying it, by all means, please reach out to our team. We would love to help you with this. And if you don't have any questions now, like I said, this is going to be posted to YouTube probably the next day or two. And then you can always also email me. There's my email right there. Or just let CDI support know. Someone will be with you very quickly. We're very responsive over here. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything coming in. And Eric, my producer, do you see anything coming in? If not, then we may just say thank you, everybody. Next month will be January, so I will say, everybody, please have a happy holiday. Be safe. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.